So today I'm going to continue reading from Seth Godin's The Practice. Alright, so I'm on chapter 9. Painting is something you do to a house. Art is the work we do when there is no right answer, and yet the journey is worth the effort. This is a similar theme to when they talk about doing something without a guarantee of success and trusting in the process regardless, that it's going to lead us to a better destination than if we were to follow a default path and just follow a standard recipe or do something boring or I don't know. Is boring the word? Not that impactful? Perhaps not that unique, though I don't know how I feel about doing something unique for the sake of being unique, but I think there's something to be said about being able to make a unique contribution or a unique impact, right? We all want to feel like our actions have an impact. And I think one way to do that is to follow a path that isn't clearly defined and to figure out a process to contribute something uniquely. And it's a very broad definition of art, saying we might make art with a keyboard, with a paintbrush, with our actions. And then chapter 10, it opens with art is what we call it when we're able to create something new that changes someone. So that's quite a broad definition. And it just feels like making something which is innovative, something new, something novel, that's able to impact or influence, change the world or change somebody, just have a positive impact. To me, that feels pretty meaningful. It feels pretty worthwhile if something's able to tick that box, right? It's so simple, at least in theory, but I don't think it's something that's always ticked by default with our professional pursuits. And often something can be impactful for some time, and perhaps when we reach the point where it's no longer inspiring or we're at the stage of marginal gains, or perhaps there's a point where we recognize that our contributions don't make that impact, then perhaps it's time to change up and switch strategies at that stage. So it goes, you've been told that if you can't win, you shouldn't even try. But now you see that the journey is the entire point. I think that's inspiring because if we're playing a game and we're always winning by default, it's almost not a game worth playing, right? And I feel like everyone's got to play at their own level. A game might be too hard for me, but it might be at the right level for you. It might be too easy for me, and it might be at the right level for you. It's relative to the player. So we should all be playing games which aren't too easy, aren't too hard, where we're in pursuit of creating a positive impact. And part of what makes it a worthwhile game is success isn't guaranteed. If success is guaranteed, it doesn't make sense. But if there's a chance of success and we're pushing ourselves to an appropriate degree, I think there's a sweet spot somewhere where we tick the boxes of being able to uniquely make a positive change in the world and do something fulfilling. Next chapter, your work is too important to be left on how you feel today. Waiting for a feeling is a luxury we don't have time for. So I take this as motivation to be consistent, to take action, to treat our side pursuits, our hobbies, our side projects that don't necessarily have the external conditions that would give us a sufficient level of accountability, like a day job might, where you've got a boss, you've got a team, etc. But this is motivation to aim for the same level of accountability that we would if we were working a job. That's how I'm taking it, at least. Treat my YouTube pursuit, take my content creation and my other creative pursuits more professionally and more seriously, just like I do with my day job, which makes a lot of sense, especially since, to me, I say these things are so important. Yet it's harder to take action on And it's a similar theme in chapter 13. It's talking about how we shouldn't wait until we're in a flow state to work, and rather flow is a symptom. And I think the abstract principle for me is just be professional and trust the process and take action. It's very helpful when we have reference points or reference experiences where we have taken action, whether we felt it or not. And over time, it becomes a habit, and over time we develop expertise and become very competent. But it's always a good reminder, especially with these side things where it's like, we just need to take action. We don't want to just wait for inspiration or wait for the feeling or wait until flow comes or whatever to do these things. That said, I feel like energy management is important because, at least for myself, there have been times in the past where I have taken action, but I regretted it because I burnt out. So I guess the reminder for myself is action is important. Feeling like it, inspiration, and flow aren't good enough excuses. Not having these isn't a good enough excuse not to put in the work. But at the same time, we need to prioritize our health and energy so we're able to do it in a responsible way. Otherwise, it's not going to be sustainable. Chapter 14. Sometimes we opt for more instead of better, but better is better than more. Makes sense. Like, we don't want to do too many things at the cost of focusing on the important thing or the one or two important things. So it makes sense in that sense where it's like, we shouldn't always opt for more and more things, but perhaps narrow down what needs to be focused on and focus on getting better at those things. But I feel like once we've narrowed down what that thing or those couple things are, then at least in the beginning, there's an argument for getting more quantity than trying to be a perfectionist, because I think through the quantity, we get the reps in, we get the feedback, and we're not at risk of getting paralyzed and overanalyzing or intellectualizing or just procrastinating. So be sure, prioritize and narrow down the things we need to focus on. Make sure they're signal rather than noise. And if we're starting out, or if we're at a stage where we're trying to develop the habit at least, then go for quantity. At least that's what I'm trying. I'll go for quantity and get the practice and repetitions and feedback with that, rather than obsessing over quality but not shipping enough and not practicing enough, right? Or not doing enough repetitions. It's a pretty long chapter, far out. It's bloody crazy. And I'm just going to go for maybe 5 more pages, then I'm going to call it. Yeah, this chapter about passion, and there's a similar theme here. It's like, don't wait until we feel the passion or we feel like we found something we're passionate to take action, because perhaps it's another excuse. It's rather we work first, we develop the skills, we become competent, and then we feel passionate and satisfied about what we're doing and fulfilled. Especially when we're able to make the impact, especially when it's creative, and especially when we get a sense of control and flexibility. So it's not always the case where passion comes at the beginning. In my career approach, it's the focus on skills and the ability to cash that in for a job that gives creativity, control, and impact. That's where the passion arises in the equation. Chapter 16 talks about the process and the outcomes, talking about focusing too much on the outcomes causes us to ignore the processes which relate to the outcomes. So it's the idea where winners and losers both have great goals. The winners normally have great processes and inputs that take them to the goals, whereas the losers probably don't. And what differentiates the two groups is the processes and the inputs and the environment and the way they approach things, rather than simplistically just the goals they have. So yeah, we really need to focus on the process and don't worry about the outcome too much, especially in the short term. but just trust the process. All right, cool. So I might leave it there. Not sure how useful these are, but it's a little experiment for me. It's fun. It's inspiring. These messages are simple, but it's often the simple things that I need to be reminded about. So just thinking out loud. Hope it's useful. See you in the flip side.